A few weeks ago, I spoke with a technician who has been working at a Tesla dealership for years. He sees hundreds of these cars every month, handling everything from warranty claims and out-of-warranty repairs to high-mileage inspections. After working on thousands of Teslas, I asked him a simple question: what never breaks? He didn't hesitate. He already had a list in mind, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask. The reason for sharing this is simple. There's no shortage of content about what goes wrong with Teslas. The 12-volt battery, suspension bushings, desiccant bags. We've talked about all of that before. But if you only focus on the problems, you end up with a very distorted view of what it actually costs to own one of these cars long-term. According to someone who inspects them every day, there are plenty of components that just don't fail, parts that would typically need replacing 2 or 3 times in a gasoline car by the time it reaches 150,000 miles, yet remain untouched in a Tesla. Here's what made that list. First, the electric motor. This is the part that surprises most people because it's also what new buyers tend to worry about the most. When I asked about motor failures in modern Teslas, the technician said he almost never sees them. In the past 3 years, he's only encountered about 5 genuine motor failures out of thousands of cars. The reason comes down to simplicity. A traditional gasoline engine has over 200 moving parts: pistons, valves, timing chains, oil pumps, fuel injectors, any of which can fail over time. In contrast, a Tesla drive motor has around 17 moving parts, mainly a rotor, a stator, and bearings. That's it. There are no oil changes, timing belts, or spark plugs, none of the usual wear and tear components found in internal combustion engines. Tesla backs the drive unit with an 8-year or 150,000-mile warranty, and according to the technician, most owners never even need to use it because the motors simply don't fail within that period. While early Model S vehicles from 2012 to 2014 did have some known drive unit issues, he said that from 2018 onward, motor reliability has essentially stopped being a concern. In his words, if you're buying a 2018 or newer Tesla, motor failure is not something you need to worry about. Next are the brake pads and rotors. In a typical gasoline car, brake pads usually need replacing every 30,000 to 50,000 miles, and rotors every 60,000 to 80,000 miles. Over 200,000 miles, that can mean up to 5 brake jobs, costing anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 in total. With Teslas, it's a different story. The technician regularly sees brake pads lasting between 100,000 and 150,000 miles, sometimes even longer. This is largely due to regenerative braking. When you lift your foot off the accelerator, the motor slows the car down by converting energy back into the battery, reducing the need for traditional braking. As a result, the physical brake components only handle about 20% to 30% of the stopping force during normal driving. He mentioned inspecting a Model 3 with 120,000 miles on it, where the brake pads still had more than half their life left. In comparison, a gasoline car like a Toyota Camry would likely have gone through at least 2 sets of brake pads by that point. That said, there is one thing to keep in mind: brake fluid. Even though the pads last much longer, the fluid still absorbs moisture over time through the hydraulic system, regardless of how often the brakes are used. Tesla recommends checking it every 2 years, and a fluid flush typically costs between $100 and $190. For most owners, this ends up being the only brake-related maintenance needed within the first 150,000 miles. Finally, there's the battery pack, the component that causes the most anxiety for potential buyers. One of the biggest fears people have is that the battery will suddenly fail around 100,000 miles and cost a fortune, something like $15,000 to replace. But according to the technician, that fear doesn't match reality. From what he sees at the dealership, battery degradation is actually quite modest. On average, most Teslas lose about 10% to 12% of their capacity even after 200,000 miles. To put that into perspective, a long-range Model Y that originally offered around 330 miles of range would still deliver roughly 295 to 300 miles after that kind of mileage. That's not a failing car. It's still performing very well. He recalled one inspection that really stood out, a 2013 Model S with over 400,000 miles on it. Expecting heavy degradation, he ran a full battery health check. The result? About 82% of its original capacity still intact, providing over 200 miles of range, even after a decade of use. His observations line up closely with what battery researchers have found. In most cases where batteries degrade quickly, there are clear reasons behind it. The two most common are consistently keeping the car charged at very high levels, like 90% or more, for long periods, and exposing the battery to excessive heat without proper thermal management. When treated reasonably, Tesla batteries tend to last much longer than people expect. As he put it, they're not the ticking time bomb. Many assume they are. He's seen plenty of them reach 300,000 to 400,000 miles with proper care, and when failures do happen early, there's almost always an identifiable cause. Next is the touchscreen and main computer, which does come with an important caveat depending on the model year. Early Model S and Model X vehicles, especially from 2012 to around 2018, had well-documented issues with their touchscreens. Things like yellowing unresponsive areas or complete failures. Fixing those could cost between $1,500 and $2,000. Tesla even faced legal action over this and extended warranty coverage as a result. That history is important if you're considering an older used Tesla. However, the technician made it clear that newer models are a completely different story. Starting around 2019, with vehicles like the Model 3, Model Y, and the refreshed Model S and Model X, the hardware improved significantly. He rarely sees screen failures in these newer cars, even at high mileage. He's inspected Model 3s with 100,000, 120,000, even 150,000 miles, and their screens still look and function like new. One big advantage here is Tesla's over-the-air update system. Unlike traditional cars, these vehicles continue to receive software updates that bring new features, performance improvements, and bug fixes, without needing any physical changes. So not only is the hardware holding up well, it actually improves over time. If you're looking at a 2019 or newer Tesla, the touchscreen is generally not something to worry about. Another area that doesn't get talked about much is the body structure and frame. This one surprised me too, because it's not something most people consider when thinking about long-term reliability. Tesla uses a mix of aluminum and high-strength steel, and according to the technician, the structural durability is genuinely impressive. He regularly sees Teslas with 200,000 or even 300,000 miles that still feel solid. The doors close with the same reassuring sound as they did when new, and there are no noticeable squeaks, rattles, or flecks in the chassis. He compared this directly to similarly priced luxury gasoline cars, whereby around 150,000 miles, you often start to notice small issues, rattling dashboards, doors that don't quite shut the same way, or slight body flex under stress. That's not something he typically sees with Teslas. One example that stuck with him was a Model 3 used as a rideshare vehicle in a major city. It had over 300,000 miles on it. During a routine inspection, he checked the structural integrity and found it to be essentially perfect. He said if someone told him the car only had 50,000 miles, he wouldn't have questioned it. To be fair, paint quality is a separate issue. Things like rock chips and minor surface scratches are known concerns. But when it comes to the underlying structure, he considers it one of Tesla's most underrated strengths. Finally, there are the door handles on the Model 3 and Model Y. This next point is worth addressing clearly because it comes up all the time in conversations about Tesla reliability, and context really matters. The early Model S had retractable motorized door handles that were known to fail quite often. It became one of the most common complaints among early Tesla owners, and understandably so. A door handle shouldn't require a service visit. However, the Model 3 and Model Y use a completely different approach. Their handles are fixed, with a simple mechanical push-button design. There's very little that can go wrong. According to the technician, doctor handle failures on these models are so rare that he doesn't even consider them a concern when thinking about long-term ownership. So if you've come across stories about Tesla door handle issues, it's important to check the model and year. Most of those complaints trace back to the older Model S design. The newer approach, starting with the Model 3, largely solved the problem, and the updated flush handle designs on newer models continue to be reliable. Next is the thermal management system, specifically when it's properly maintained. Tesla's liquid cooling system for the battery is, in his words, very well engineered. It keeps the battery cells within a tight temperature range during charging, driving, and even when the car is parked. This plays a big role in why Tesla batteries last as long as they do. As for the hardware itself, the cooling loops, pumps, and plumbing, he rarely sees failures. The system is generally very durable. There is one important exception, though, the desiccant bag in the air conditioning system. This is something that requires periodic replacement, and the interval depends on the model. When it's replaced on schedule, the thermal system continues to operate smoothly for the life of the car. If it's ignored, however, the desiccant material can break down and release particles into the system. That can damage the compressor and lead to expensive repairs. His point was simple. The thermal system itself is solid. Most costly repairs happen because that one maintenance item was skipped, either by the current owner or a previous one. Stay on top of it, and the thermal system remains highly reliable. Ignore it, and problems can follow. At the end of our conversation, I asked him what advice he'd give to someone hesitant about buying a Tesla due to concerns about long-term reliability. His answer was straightforward. Plan for the few things that do require maintenance, like the 12-volt battery, brake fluid, the desiccant bag on certain models, and suspension components on high-mileage cars. But also recognize that the core parts of the vehicle, the motor, battery, braking system, and structural integrity, are generally far more reliable than most people expect. If this gave you a clearer picture of what owning a Tesla looks like at 100,000, 200,000, or even 300,000 miles, consider sharing it or subscribing. It takes just a second and it helps more people, especially those making a big purchase decision, get a more balanced understanding. Thanks for reading.